This Oukitel K10 is for those people who want a battery pack integrated into the back of their cell phone. I mean, take your pick. You can either watch local video for 50 hours, or you can watch YouTube for 35 hours, or you can play games for 15 hours. I mean, take your pick. Those are all things that you guys don't do on a regular basis. And if you do, this is the phone for you. If you want to see more reviews on cheap and interesting phones like this, why not subscribe? It's free. The big selling point of this phone is the battery life. It got 50 hours of screen on time watching local video, and if you like that kind of battery life, why don't you hit that like button for this video? That would be awesome. To be honest, this is quite a complete phone. You've got insane battery life, you've got fairly good build quality, you've got a good display, you've got fairly good performance and good speeds as well. But there is one point of this phone that is slightly weaker, and I'm sure you can guess what that is, but let's get started with the review. So let's talk about the build quality on this phone. I want to summarize it very quickly. This phone is well built, it's solid, but it's also absolutely massive. So let's start with the well built portion of this phone. This phone is made of glass on the front. You've got a metal band running around it, a metal frame, and then you have a plastic bezel going around it as well. And finally, the back is made out of leather. I'm not sure if this is real or fake. I mean, it does feel fairly okay. But yeah, this phone is definitely well built, and you can see that there is a cutout for the cameras as well as the fingerprint sensor, and it looks pretty good for such a big battery phone. The phone also feels really solid. It kind of feels like a rugged phone in terms of size as well as feel. You have very sharp angular edges, which really make it look, again, like a rugged phone, even though it's really not, and you really should not treat this phone as a rugged phone, because if you do, this thing is going to destroy itself, as it's not built to withstand the various rugged things you do to it, like kicking it and smacking it with a stick and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, this thing is definitely a lot more solid than all the other glass phones that I get. This phone is also insanely massive. It's 1.3 centimeters thick, as you can see from this angle. This phone is thicker than most other thin phones combined. So you could probably put two iPhone 8s here and it would still be thinner than this phone. This phone is also really long. It's 17 centimeters from top to bottom, and that is bigger than most 6-inch devices. It's probably longer than the Mi Max 2, which is 6.4 inches, because there is a massive battery to fit in here as well. So if you have tight pockets, this thing is probably not going to fit because of how long it is and because of how thick it is as well. So here on this phone, there is no headphone jack on the top, and if you look at the bottom of the phone, there is a USB-C jack as well as speakers as well. The more I stare at the screen on the Oukitel K10, the more I'm impressed by how good this display looks. Oukitel has really put in a very good LCD display in this phone, and in fact it's actually better than Helio Power 3, the Verni X, and even the Maze Alpha X in terms of color saturation and contrast, and even beside an AMOLED screen, it actually holds its own pretty well also. The sunlight visibility here is okay. It can be difficult to see in direct bright sunlight. And the other thing to note is that there is no Gorilla Glass on the screen, so you better leave the screen protector on, the one that comes pre-installed on the screen, so you do not scratch it inadvertently when you're using the phone. Let's talk a little bit about sound. You got a single speaker at the bottom of the phone, and audio here is actually not bad, partly most likely because of how big the body is, so there really is a lot of space for the sound to fill. There's nice mids, there is quite a bit of treble, and there is also a little bit of bass as well. But at max volume, there is a little bit of distortion from the speaker. It could be vibrations as well, considering how big the phone is, especially when there's explosions or loud and sharp noises like swords clashing. But if you turn the volume down, then the distortions do go away. So have a listen to this clip from Jackie Chan's movie. Now, battery life. I already did a full battery test for the Oukitel K10 in my full battery review that you can check out above. But to summarize this phone with the MTK6763 processor and an 11,000 mAh battery, you're going to get insane battery life on this phone. So to summarize the important battery numbers I got, I played back a local video file for 23 hours and it used 46% of the battery. Now, if you multiply both the hours and the percentages by 2, you could get 46 hours of local video playback at 92%, which means that you can get very close to that 50-hour screen on time mark for local video playback. And for YouTube, I could play back video for about 30 to 35 hours. It's less because you do have to stream, but it's still insane. And I could get around 14 hours of mixed gaming, and that consisted of Injustice, Super Mario, Modern Combat, Asphalt, and Subway Surfers. So it's not all intense games, there are some less intense games there, but nevertheless, it's still very, very good. But the efficiency on this MTK 6763 with gaming is not very good. Now let's talk a little bit about standby battery drain that I talked about in my battery review. To be honest, this standby battery drain was mostly my fault. I first got 13% battery drain in about 8 hours, which is pretty bad. Once I fixed the wake locks, it was then about 0.5% per hour, which is still pretty bad considering how big the battery is. So 0.5% of 11,000 milliamp hours is not small. But now that I fixed everything, I'm getting about 7% battery drain over 2.5 days, which is about 60 hours. So you get about 1% battery drop every 10 hours. So that's very good. So this is the first phone I've ever used in my life where I can get 6 days of heavy use easily. Even the Mi Max 2 and the Redmi 5 Plus struggle to get 6 days of heavy use, mostly because they have smaller battery packs. But if there was a 10,000 milliamp hour battery with a Snapdragon 625, you probably could get like 10 days if you wanted to. I remember someone was telling me in the comments that they go hiking for 10 days at a time. This is the phone for you. I get 1% battery drain about every 10 hours, so you can easily get 10 days of use out of this phone. Charging took about 5 hours with a non-quick charger and about 3 hours with a pump express charger. Software here is very stock and very nice. I'm very appreciative of Oukitel that they have not put a skin on top of Android. There is an ugly icon pack that I really don't like. It looks really old-fashioned. But then again, it's just an icon pack and everything else is stock. They're not using any of the resources to make this phone look a certain way, which is very good as that leaves the resources for other things like launching apps and stuff like that. Opening apps here is actually not as fast as the fastest Helio P23 processor phones like the Maze Alpha X, but it's still pretty good. You can see that there is a tiny bit of hesitation when I'm opening apps. But it's definitely on par or even a little bit faster than the Ulefone Power 3 and the Maze Alpha X, which is pretty decent. There is a little bit of stutter when you're in the app sometimes, and that is to be expected sometimes from the Helio P23 processor. Gaming here is very good. I did a full gaming review up above, and if you bump settings down, everything runs no problem, and I could even screen record at the same time with very minimal stutter, which is actually very decent for this Helio P23 chip. And yeah, if you want a phone that can game very well and game for a long time, this Oukitel is the phone for you. The Fingerman Sensor here is not bad, but it's not great. It's fairly accurate, but it's also not too fast either. So when you touch it, there is a little bit of hesitation, especially compared to like a OnePlus 5T or even like my Xiaomi Mi Note 3. But then again, it's definitely more than good enough to use for daily use. So let's talk network connectivity. This phone will not get 3G or 4G in the USA, so don't even try. It's kind of sad actually. But as you can see, the speeds here are insane. It's using up my data at speeds that are pretty unprecedented, and I'm gonna run out of data very, very soon. But 60 megabits is something I've actually not seen in many other phones. And the upload here is actually pretty crazy as well. As you can see, it's maxing out at 30 megabits, which again is using up my data very, very fast. And to be honest, I think the Oukitel K10 is actually one of the fastest LTE phones that I've used so far, even faster than the OnePlus 5T, which is kind of surprising, as well as my Xiaomi Mi Note 3, which is a lot more expensive than this phone. It's like $350 when it first came out, now it's $300, but still pretty good. Wi-Fi is great, Bluetooth is okay. GPS is a little bit wonky sometimes. It jumps around. It does take a little bit of a long time to get a lock, but then again, GPS does work in a pinch when you need it. You also have NFC in this phone, and NFC works. I could transfer stuff from and to this phone from my other NFC phones, but I didn't get a chance to use Android Pay because my credit cards are not supported on Android Pay, which is very, very sad, but it will work on other phones and other credit cards as well. So I did a full camera review already that you can check up above, but this phone can take some really good photos. I was actually very, very surprised. I was not expecting this phone to take as good photos as it did. You can take photos with great color reproduction. There is some very, very nice detail. And when you take macro shots, the macro shots look pretty amazing. But then again, there are still downsides to the camera. If you zoom into these macro shots, there is still some noise that you can see. The HDR mode here also works pretty well, especially when you have high contrast, high dynamic range shots. It really equalizes them very, very well. But then again, if you have some shots that are not as high dynamic range and not as high contrast, it has a tendency to wash out those shots a little bit, but those are pretty rare. There are some issues as well, like focusing, but then again, the focusing issues were pretty rare. I didn't encounter them too much, maybe like 3 or 4 times throughout my use. I hope Oukitel addresses in the future, but then again, it's not too big a deal. However, a bigger deal is the yellow compensation that sometimes happens when I'm taking landscape shots. There are certain ways that I compose shots where this phone will overcompensate and make the photo look super yellow. And that happens quite a bit, especially when I'm taking landscape shots that include something that is already green or yellow, like grass. Then it makes the entire photo look like it was completely painted yellow. So I really hope Oukitel addresses this as soon as possible. And also the blurry mode is pretty crappy as well. The front-facing camera is okay, but there is a huge issue with the front-facing camera. It is software related, and that would be the video and the audio being out of sync, which is super duper annoying. Video quality is 1080p, but the detail looks more like 720p, and the colors are not reproduced very nicely either. So take a look at this video to judge for yourself what it looks like, and to be honest, I don't think many of you are gonna like it. So do I recommend this phone? Well, if you are a regular person, no, you do not need 11,000 milliamp hours for a daily driver. A Redmi 5 Plus or the Ulefone Power 3 or maybe even the Mi Max 2 is way more than enough than what you need. However, if you want stupid, insane battery because of specific situations that you are in, for example, hiking for 10 days, or you're on a night shift and you want to play video games for like 20 hours, this is pretty much the only option you have, and you have to basically hope that the rest of the phone is good. Otherwise, you have no other options to go with. Even the Ulefone Power 3 or the Mi Max 2, those might struggle keeping up with this phone in terms of battery life. Thankfully though, the rest of this phone is good. It's got a really solid build. It's really big, but that's also understandable. It has a very nice screen. It has good audio, and the 50-hour screen on time is insane for the battery life. There's great standby battery as well. Performance here is good, and the weak point here is the camera. The camera has some weird quirks like yellow focus issue, which is rare, but you can take good photos. The biggest downside to the camera here would be the video quality. The video quality is really not great. I don't know if Oukitel can fix it because it kind of looks like it could be a hardware issue, but if they could fix it, this could be a very decent phone. That being said, even though you're considering this phone is fairly expensive at $280. And when you consider the battery life, it's not actually that expensive. If you are specifically looking for easy 6-day battery life, this is the only phone you can buy. And it's actually not bad for the price, so check out their link below. If you enjoyed this review and want to see more like this, subscribe to see what else is coming up in the review pipeline. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.